The FIA has just confirmed there were irregularities on Lando Norris' car in Abu Dhabi. This changes everything. Telemetry differences, unexplained engine settings, and hidden torque maps have triggered a full post-race investigation. Oscar Piastri may have been denied a fair shot at the title. If the FIA finds that McLaren gave Norris an advantage without informing Piastri's side, the championship result could be overturned and Piastri crowned world champion. Subscribe right now because what happens next could deliver the most shocking title twist in Formula One history, and you'll want to be here when it happens. Oscar Piastri's quiet brilliance all season long might now be rewarded in the most unexpected way. Just hours after the checkered flag fell at Yas Marina, the FIA released a preliminary report confirming significant telemetry inconsistencies between the two McLaren cars. The wording alone set off shockwaves across the paddock. What was once considered a closed championship could be reopened not by lap times, but by a technical breach that directly impacts the fairness of the final race. The initial concern came from a post-race audit on energy deployment figures and throttle behavior in Lando Norris' car during the second and third stints. Engineers outside McLaren had noticed how Norris gained consistent traction advantages without any visual driving change. Meanwhile, Piastri, who was neck and neck in pace all weekend, failed to match those gains despite identical tire wear and setup baselines. These small technical signs lit the match for a formal review, and now, that match has turned into a bonfire. Behind closed doors, the FIA's technical analysts pulled full ECU logs from both cars. Their goal was simple: verify whether any non-approved engine map or torque setting had been activated and whether both cars were given equal access. What they found was troubling. Norris' car operated under a modified energy recovery strategy for several laps, delivering enhanced mid-corner rotation and earlier throttle pickup, particularly through sectors 2 and 3. These changes were not mirrored on Piastri's car. Even more damning was the discovery that Norris' race engineer had given coded instructions mid-stint directions that were not part of the pre-race briefing, and were absent from Piastri's radio communications. If these messages were used to activate restricted maps or override power delivery modes, it represents a direct breach of Article 9.3.2, which requires equal technical tools between teammates at all times. In a season finale where both drivers had title implications, such an act could be championship-defining. McLaren's public stance has been limited to a single statement: "We are reviewing the findings and fully cooperating with the FIA." But internally, tension is rising. Members within Piastri's camp believe the Australian was intentionally kept out of the performance loop in Abu Dhabi. Some engineers reportedly pushed for transparency ahead of qualifying, but were overruled. Whether this was a calculated risk or a communication breakdown is now irrelevant. The result is under investigation, and the outcome could flip the 2025 standings. For Oscar Piastri, the news has changed everything. He delivered a clean, strategic race, followed every plan, and stayed within striking range of Norris throughout. Had both cars operated on equal terms, many believe he would have had the edge. Now, with the FIA confirming irregularities, he may receive something no rookie ever expects: a second chance and possibly a world title. The next few hours could define the rest of his career. This is not just about one driver. This is about integrity at the top level of motorsport. If the FIA determines that McLaren gave preferential treatment to Norris through unapproved technical means, the penalty could include disqualification from the Abu Dhabi race or nullification of the results. In that case, Piastri would leapfrog into championship victory not because of politics, but because of fairness. The investigation is active, the evidence is mounting, and the entire Formula One world is now watching every move. The telemetry doesn't lie, and in this case, it's exactly what triggered the FIA's red flags. On the surface, Norris' lap time seemed consistent with a driver managing tires and defending position. But when analysts overlaid the delta comparisons between Norris and Piastri, discrepancies began to appear in energy deployment profiles. Specifically, Norris was able to consistently regenerate and deploy electrical power earlier out of corners, especially turns 5, 9, and 14, while Piastri's data showed conservative output in the same moments. This gain wasn't just about battery usage. In hybrid Formula One cars, energy recovery and deployment are controlled through highly sophisticated maps that adjust based on gear selection, steering angle, and throttle pressure. In Norris' case, the FIA found an unusually linear torque curve in the second and third stints, especially when the tires were starting to degrade. Piastri's data, by contrast, showed the expected drop-off in traction and corner exit speed. The question is, why was Norris immune to that drop? Lap-by-lap overlays revealed that Norris was gaining between 0.18 and 0.27 seconds per lap from lap 18 to lap 26, all from the same sectors where battery output makes the biggest difference. These gains weren't reflected in tire delta degradation or fuel load, suggesting they came from software intervention. If the FIA confirms that these gains were unlocked via a late race setting change, and not disclosed to both sides of the garage, it is grounds for post-race sanction. Further evidence lies in the RPM data. Norris' car hit rev ranges nearly 300 revolutions per minute higher at full deployment during DRS zones compared to Piastri, even though both were on similar power unit programs before the race. The only way that variation is possible is if his engine was either operating in a different mode or if throttle calibration had been adjusted to deliver more aggressive pickup. Both scenarios are tightly regulated and require symmetrical disclosure between both drivers. What has truly caught the FIA's attention, however, is not just the numbers but the timing. The irregularities started after lap 17, immediately following a coded radio message from Norris' engineer. The language used, according to FIA transcribers, did not correspond to any documented mode switch from the pre-race technical sheet. If that message was used to activate a restricted override, without sharing it with Piastri's side, that's a direct breach of protocol and deeply serious. It's important to note that these differences, while small in raw time, are monumental in context. Piastri lost the championship by less than 5 points. A 0.2 second advantage per lap over a full stint translates to multiple seconds gained, enough to create the gap that protected Norris from a late undercut or tire challenge. In a sport where a thousandth of a second can define a career, these laps could now define a title. At the core of all this is equality. Formula One demands that both drivers within a team be given the same opportunities. If the FIA concludes that Norris received a unique setup, an undisclosed update, or a more favorable deployment strategy without it being mirrored on Piastri's side, it undermines the very idea of fair racing. The FIA's next steps are clear: a deeper review of setup sheets, software changelogs, and pre-race declarations, all of which now hold the fate of this championship. To fully understand why the FIA's findings are so serious, we need to look at the architecture of a modern Formula One power unit. Each car runs an Energy Recovery System (ERS), which includes the MGUK and MGUH units, harvesting kinetic and heat energy respectively and deploying that stored power through carefully calculated engine maps. These maps are preloaded into the Electronic Control Unit (ECU) and must be declared to the FIA prior to each session. Every variation in map behavior must be documented, tested, and disclosed. Now, here's where it becomes critical. Article 9.3.2 of the FIA's sporting regulations mandates that both drivers in the same team must have access to the same tools, including engine modes, energy deployment strategies, and torque mapping. If Norris' car had an exclusive override mode or received an update to its energy release parameters that was not equally shared with Piastri, then McLaren would be in direct violation of that article. It wouldn't matter whether the gain was small, only that the advantage was unequal. The FIA uses encrypted software audits and full telemetry downloads post-race to ensure compliance. When a team modifies a parameter such as battery delivery or throttle response, these changes leave digital fingerprints. In this case, FIA analysts noted a deviation in Norris' deployment window compared to Piastri's, and this deviation wasn't logged in the team's pre-race ECU documentation. That single discrepancy is what opened the door to a regulatory investigation and could now be the basis for a formal protest. Adding to the suspicion is the discovery of mid-race radio instructions that triggered the deployment change. According to FIA sources, Norris was given a coded message from his engineer not listed in the standard map change vocabulary agreed with race control. These code words are usually agreed pre-weekend for tactical purposes, but any unlisted change must still be flagged if it affects car performance. The fact that Piastri's engineer gave no similar instruction suggests either miscommunication or something more deliberate. What makes the situation even more delicate is the software control logic. Most power unit maps can only be activated via driver input, but they can also be preset from the pit wall via strategy modes. If McLaren's engineers uploaded a new engine map to Norris' car before the race or during the red flag system reset, but failed to sync that configuration with Piastri's vehicle, it would breach not only Article 9.3.2 but also the technical compliance protocols for race parity. That's grounds for disqualification under the FIA's own code. From a competitive standpoint, having access to an aggressive torque curve or enhanced ERS boost gives a driver better traction, earlier throttle, and more consistent top-end acceleration, exactly what Norris demonstrated during the race. While Piastri drove a cleaner first stint, it was the second stint where Norris began to pull away. If this performance came from a non-disclosed deployment mode, it artificially altered the outcome of a championship-deciding battle. That's no longer just a team error. That's a sporting offense. The FIA is now in a position where it must determine intent. Was the deployment advantage a result of internal miscommunication, or was it a strategic choice by McLaren to favor one driver over another? Either outcome carries consequences. If intent is proven, sanctions could include race result annulment or driver disqualification. If not, a team penalty and points reduction may still apply. For Piastri, who followed every protocol and raced with the information he was given, this ruling could transform him from runner-up to world champion based not on emotion, but on hard, irrefutable regulation.